Thank you. At this time, if you would silence all phones and electronic devices. If you don't agree with any of the recommendations made by this commission, the appeals cards are to our right. You would fill one out for the parish council. Speaker cards are also available. We would ask that you fill one out in order to speak, or if not, immediately following, so we have a record. Each side will be given 10 minutes, both in support of or in opposition of our cases, with 5-minute rebuttals. And if you would, at the end of our case, if you wish to discuss it, please leave the building, as if you go back into the lobby area, it does echo back into the chamber. At this time, I would ask Commissioner Randolph to lead us in invocation and Commissioner Lauren in a pledge of allegiance.
Gracious Father, once again, we come to you to say thank you for all the blessings you bestowed in our lives. We thank you for this day. We thank you for watching over, protecting us, our families, and every citizen of this parish. We thank you for this parish council, this parish commission, and Lord, allow us to make decisions that's in the best interest of all. And all these blessings we ask in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have distributed the minutes of the November 5th, 2014 meeting. Are there any comments to be made?
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the November meeting minutes as written.
We have a motion by Mr. Matthews, a second by Mr. Lauren. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I ask for a vote. Motion carries. Ask for a motion of approval of the minutes of the January 6, 2015 meeting. Mr. Matthews.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Matthews and a second by Mr. Randolph. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I ask for a vote. Motion carries. Staff, do you have any recommendations of postponement of cases?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The number one on the agenda is ZC 15-01007. We are still in the process of reaching out to the property owner.
ZC, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on ZC 15-01-007? Staff has recommended postponement. Seeing none, I close to the public. I bring it to the commission. Mr. Matthews.
Staff, do you think that you'll have this accomplished by next month, or do you have any idea?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Actually, we received the card from the confirmation from the property owner that they've had notice. However, we couldn't, it came in later in January, so we didn't want to put them back on the agenda. Just give them a chance to make plans to attend if they wish to attend.
I move to postpone this to the March meeting.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Matthews and a second by Mr. Davis, but let me read the case. ZC 15-01-007, existing zoning A4 single-family residential district, proposed zoning A4 single-family residential district, and manufacturing housing overlay. The parcel is 7.47 acres. The petitioner, Parish Council by motion, November 6, 2014. The parcel is located on the south side of Powell Drive, west of Grace Drive, Ward 9, District 14. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment? Hearing none, I ask for a vote. Motion for postponement carries.
Also, case number 3, ZC 15-01-009, which is a text change regarding the breezeway. We are still working on a definition, and hopefully we'll have a better definition, provide clarification next month.
ZC 15-01-009, a text change, an ordinance to amend the St. Tammany Parish Unified Development Code, Volume 1, Zoning, Article 2, Definitions, to add the definition of breezeway. Staff is recommending postponement. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, I close it to the public. I bring it to the commission. Mr. Randolph.
Mr. Chairman, I move to table.
We have a motion by Mr. Randolph to postpone.
Postpone, but we have to have a date. We need a
Yeah,
date to postpone.
Thank you. Postponement for until our next meeting?
March meeting.
Postponed to March, second by Mr. Matthews. Is there any other comments? Seeing none, I ask for a vote. Motion for postponement carries.
No other request.
Thank you. We're on agenda item 2, ZC 15-01-008, existing zoning A1 Suburban District, proposed zoning AT1 Animal Training Housing District. The parcel is 6.061 acres. The petitioner, Jason Dalton. The owner, Scarlett Dalton. Representative, Mr. Paul Marone. The parcel located on the south side of Louisiana Highway 1085, west of Whitechapel Road, being 14279 Louisiana 1085, Covington, Ward 1, District 3. Staff?
The site is currently developed with a commercial kennel. Staff does not have any objection to the requested zoning change, considering that the objective of the request is to bring the site into compliance with the appropriate zoning. Note that the property was zoned SA Suburban Agricultural prior to the comprehensive rezoning, and a commercial kennel was listed as an allowable use under SA. And I would also like to note that the owner submitted a revised survey and would like to request to reduce the acreage for the rezoning from 6 acres to 2 acres, and staff would like to recommend approval of the request.
Mr. Marone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Maroon on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Dalton. As Ms. Lambert just noted, this particular property is the location for an existing commercial kennel, the Camp Bow Wow facility, which has been there for about 5 years. At the time that the property was purchased and the facility constructed, the property was zoned suburban agriculture, which at that time allowed as a permitted use commercial kennels. As a result of the comprehensive rezoning, the property was rezoned to A1 residential, which resulted in the facility being grandfathered in but a non-conforming use. The purpose of the request this evening is simply to give the existing use the proper zoning so that it is in fact conforming going forward. Since the filing of the case, we've had an opportunity to meet with some of the residents that live in and around the area. I think Mr. and Ms. Kastner and Mr. and Mrs. Fonkeberter are here this evening. We met with them. They had some concerns and some requests of the Daltons, which we have been able to agree to make some changes or some adjustments to the property in an effort to resolve some of those concerns. One of the largest concern that they had was the need to rezone, or our requested need to rezone the full 6 acres. Truth in fact, we don't need to do that. The facility that we have is located on the front 2 acres of the property. So we would officially request that and amend our request this evening so that it is not on the full 6 acres, but is only on the front 2 acre parcels, which we've given the revised survey to Ms. Lambert. It is, in fact, if you were to go out to the property, you would notice that there is a portion in the front that is cleared where the facility is. It is really only that cleared portion. The vast majority of the property, the remaining 4 acres, will remain zoned A1. and be used for residential purposes if it's used at all. But our intent is simply to use the 2 acres that's there, so we would amend our request accordingly. In addition, and while it's not necessarily within the purview of the commission, I did want to state for the record that through our discussions with the residents, we have agreed to go in and file a deed restriction on the property to address a lot of their concerns. And I'll be submitting a letter to Ms. Lambert this evening that I drafted to Mr. Funkyberter, identifying those items and the process by which we would make that deed restriction filing. But to illustrate a few of the items for you, we're going to gate the facility so that there's no access after hours. We're going to limit the outside activities on Sundays for the animals. We're going to do some soundproofing inside the facility. We're going to do some bamboo planting on the perimeters of the facility. And there are a number of other items in there that we've worked out and that we're happy to do as an olive branch to the neighbors so that this facility fits in with their nearby residences and hopefully make it more compatible for them going forward. So with that said, we would respectfully request your approval on just the 2 acres, and that's the front 2 acres of the property, the 2 acres that fronts Highway 1085, from A1 to the AT1 Animal Training and Housing District. I'll be happy to answer any questions that any of the commissioners may have.
Thank you, Mr. Marone. Is there anyone else in the public who wishes to speak in favor of this change? Seeing no one, is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition? I then close it to the public and bring it back to the commission. Mr. Davis.
I believe Pug had his light on first.
Excuse me. Mr. Lauren.
Mr. Morone? Looking at the survey we have, it's for the 6.061 acres. My question is, if you zone off the front 2 acres, it looks like the Soap and Tyler Creek lateral runs across the back. What would be the access to that back property?
It would only be through the front property.
What I'm saying is there some plans for a driveway or something,
At-
road or?
At this time, there is no plans for that rear 4 acres. If and when there is any intent to utilize it, it would be for residential purposes, and the access would have to be through basically the parking lot of the existing facility in front.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Davis.
Yes, Paul. I agree. This would probably put it back into appropriate zoning for the front portion, and I appreciate you doing only the front 2 acres. According to my calculations, that's about 259 foot by frontage by 336 deep. So, and
That's
with the
correct.
rest staying A1, it's too bad we don't have a animal training overlay. Anyway, but with that being said, I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Mr. Davis, a second by Mr. Willie. Is there any further comments? Mind you, the motion would be as amended to 2 acres, correct? Okay,
That is correct.
thank you. Again, we have a motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries. Item 3 was postponed. Item 4. ZC 15-02-010, existing zoning, A1 Suburban District, proposed zoning, A1 Suburban District and rural overlay. The parcel is 1 acre. The petitioner, Timothy E. By. The owner, Timothy E. and Diana By. The parcel is located on the south side of Godet Court, east of Louisiana Highway 1085, being Lot 1B, 208, Godet Court, Madisonville, Ward 1, District 1. Staff?
Staff doesn't have any objection to the requested zoning change, as 2025 future land use plan calls for the area to be developed with residential uses, including rural residential. Staff feels that the rural overlay is appropriate for the area and would like to recommend approval.
Is the petitioner here? Would you care to come and address to the commission?
Yeah, I'm applying for this for a shop garage before I construct my house, and I appreciate y'all approval.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to speak for the zoning change? Anyone in opposition? Seeing none, I close it to the public and I bring it back to the commission. Mr. Davis.
Mr. Bai? Could you come up, please? Well, what are your plans for the size of the shop?
Max 40 by 40, but probably smaller than that.
1,600?
Yeah, we
Because,
still-
according to the rural overlay, you can build up to 5,000 square foot, is that correct?
It's a maximum of 7.5% of the total acreage of the property.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one, believe it or not, is giving me a little pause, and I just need some clarification, perhaps from staff or maybe Mr. Bai. When you do a rural overlay, and I'm all for that, it brings in agricultural opportunities, which could be, chickens and goats and cows and everything else. Again, that's right up my alley, but this is a 1 acre parcel. Is that correct? And it's kind of it looks like it had been subdivided. There's quite if this map that we were provided is correct, there's quite a few 1 acre parcels. Mr. Bai, perhaps you can answer a question. Is this all owned by you?
I have the acre right next to it, 1A, and our plans are to be constructing a house within the next year and a half, 2 years.
Okay.
And this is just basically to storage my lawn equipment, try to keep the place clean.
I understand, and again, I fully support it. This is more of a philosophical question here. We've got something zoned A1, but it's a series of 1 acre lots. How is that? I mean, isn't A1 typically a much larger parcel, 5 acres?
Yes, through the comprehensive rezoning, the entire area was rezoned to A1, and those parcels were already created.
Okay. Okay. So the chances are if we have, say, agriculture there, farming, you've got these 1 acre parcels side by side, and nobody has a concern that this area can support that. We could have pure agricultural opportunities right next to 1 acre parcels with homes on them.
Yes, this is the request that is in front of you this evening. That's correct.
Okay, no problem. I was just more concerned about the A1, and we have a series of 1 acre lots.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Casabon.
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Ms. Casabon to approve.
Second.
Second by Mr. Lauren. Mr. Matthews.
I have some questions, I guess, really of staff. Helen, under the rural overlay, what would this be considered, this shop that he's going to talking about?
It's considered as a barn, an agricultural building. And right now, the owner is not allowed to build an accessory structure without the main residence. So by rezoning to the rural overlay, it will allow him to build a barn on a piece of property without the main residence. And it's 2 separate parcels, so he's planning on building the house on one and the barn on the other.
Okay, under permitted uses, there's A, agricultural, and B, residential. Which does this fit under, and which subsection?
If you just want to give me a moment, I
Sure.
just... Under agricultural uses, agricultural buildings, under the rural overlay.
Okay. Mr. Bai, what are your plans for this shop or this building?
I was just planning to store my lawn equipment, lawn tractor, four-wheeler, until I construct my house. It helps me that I won't have to, I live on the South Shore, and that way I won't have to haul it back and forth all the time for the next year and a half while I'm clearing and getting ready to construct my house.
Under A1, there is an accessory use, a private garage. Wouldn't that fall under that, Helen?
No, sir. It's
Why?
considered as an accessory structure to the main residence.
Helen, it is your determination it does fit with that new zoning classification, correct?
That's correct.
And Mr. Matthews, are you questioning whether it fits under any of those definitions?
Well, I don't think it's going to be an agricultural building. He's going to store his lawnmower and
This
stuff
is,
like that in.
it's
But again,
considered as an agricultural building.
Say again, excuse me?
It is considered as an agricultural building,
Because of what's being stored?
yes.
Okay. Mr. Davis?
Yeah, Helen, question for Helen. So after this gentleman builds his house, he'll come back and rezone the area back to A1 again?
No, it will not be necessary, and unless if I'm mistaken, he will keep the two parcels of land separated. So you will have to keep the rural overlay to keep it as a
Gotcha.
permitted use.
Okay, Mr. Bonnie, one more time, I'm sorry. You say you have a rough idea of how big this building's gonna be on this 1
The
acre?
max would be 40 by 40, but it's probably looking like 20 by 40. Somewhere in there, 20 by 30.
Well, can't we put a maximum size of this rural overlay instead of the whole acre? And just do the parcel of where the actual building's gonna be? And then that way, everybody's, doesn't feel like the whole acre is gonna be a rural overlay. That can be done, correct?
But you- I
If there's
don't see-
concern about the whole acre being agriculture.
No, I don't see as this being a
Okay,
concern, but.
that's all, I'm just bringing up an idea.
Mr. Matthews?
Reading the definition of agricultural building, it says, it shall imply any building structure existing or erected on land used principally for agricultural purposes. That's not what this is going to be. This is going to be a residential. So,
The purpose of the request is to place an agricultural building on the property to keep equipment to maintain the property. And, you know, if-
cutting your grass
if
is
you-
not
if-
maintaining property,
If you wish, you know, we can
agricultural.
consult legal counsel.
Helen, in the past, that's what it's been classified as?
Absolutely, many discussion with Mr. Fontenot.
Okay.
That's not what the definition says it is.
Mr. Matthews, you've asked two questions, and they've answered them to the best of their ability, including counsel. Would anyone else care to speak? We have a motion and a second to approve. I ask for a vote. Motion carries. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
ZC 15-02-011, existing zoning, A3 Suburban District, proposed zoning, A3 Suburban District, and manufactured housing overlay. The parcel, 19,000 square feet. The petitioner, Sandra Aloydma Duarte. The owner, Sandra Aloydma Duarte. The parcel, located on the north side of Marshy Street, east of Iron Street, west of Wood Street, being Lot 5, Square 8, Hillcrest Country Club Estates, Ad Number 2, Ward 10, District 6. Staff?
The 2025 future land use plan calls for the area to be developed with residential uses, including manufactured homes. Staff doesn't have any objections to the request and would like to recommend approval.
Hi, I'm Nelson. I'm her translator.
Okay, if you would state your full name
Nelson Gerardo Ponce.
and you are translating for.
Sandra Duartes. She's looking to move her mobile home onto her property for several reasons. One being, well, the main reason why the parents ever do anything is for their children. That's her main concern. She wants her own property for her children to play. Right now, she lives in a trailer park, and they actually have a child that's bullying her child every single day. So that's one of her concerns. Another concern is there's not that much yard. She was at home the other night, and her husband took her car, and her husband took his car, and her daughter took her car, and it was like 9 at night, and someone actually tried to break in. So that's like also a concern for her. It's not as safe as it would be on her own property. Then she also has the rent. You know, she's paying rent. If she were to move into her own land, that would be one less payment, and that money could go towards helping her kids with tutoring, clothes, stuff of that material, and we would just appreciate your approval.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the zoning change? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Hearing none, I close it to the public and I bring it to the commission. Mr. Matthews.
There are several manufactured housing in this immediate area, and this would surely fit right into that. And lots of good reasons for this lady to get her property, and I'll move to approve.
Motion made by Mr. Matthews, a second by Mr. Dougherty. Ms. Casabon. Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I ask for a vote. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. ZC 15-02-012, existing zoning, A1 Suburban District, proposed zoning, AT1 Animal Training Housing District. The parcel is 1 acre. The petitioner, Doria Durham. The owner, EGP LLC. The parcel located on the east side of Isabel Swamp Road, north of Louisiana Highway 40, Ward 5, District 6. Staff?
The 2025 future land use plan calls for the area to be developed with residential and rural uses. Staff doesn't have any objection to the request. Please note that the purpose of the rezoning is for the placement of a cell tower on the site, and staff would like to recommend approval.
Is the petitioner here?
Good evening, I'm Doria Durham. This is a project actually that I've been working on since March of 2012. Initially, the site that we selected was just south of Highway 40, east of 1082. And through some objections of the old military road, I believe it is, the homeowners association, we were asked to move the site further north. So this location is actually on property that was recommended and suggested by the homeowners association. It's approximately 1.4 miles north of our original location. So we feel like we've worked long and hard to find a location that was favorable to all parties. And I ask that you please give consideration and approve this motion.
Thank you. Would anyone else care to speak on this case? Please approach the podium and state your name, please.
Step out of my media hat here for just a second. Bill McHugh on Bright Penny Road in Bush. I live in this area, and I was not directly involved, but I attended the meetings on the original site that they had in mind. It was Brad King's property near the intersection of 1082 and 40. And while the neighbors were not wildly enthusiastic about that, they did recognize the need for cell towers in this area to improve reception, and were in favor of a tower, just not in that location. So I don't think there would be a problem with the neighbors, at least from my experience.
If you would fill out a speaker card, please, sir. Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, I close it to the public and I bring it to the commission. Mr. Lauren.
Helen, I have a question. It just seems strange to me that if we are going to approve a site for a cell tower, that we're going to call it an animal training. It just seems out of whack.
The reason for the request is because it's probably the less intensive zoning that would allow a cell tower to be placed there, but also with the uses that are listed under AT1 would also be permitted under the rural overlay that is in that area. But that's the reason why the request is being made. They could request industrial or commercial zoning, but that would not be appropriate for the area.
Okay.
Ms. Casabon.
Yes, this is really a perfect area. It is in the middle of, when it says Isabel Swamp Road, it really is a swamp. I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Ms. Casabon, a second by Mr. Willie. Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, I guess this is really more administrative. Before the meeting and even at, when I was reviewing this, there was some confusion. Under the AT1 designation itself, there's no provision for a cell tower. When you look under minimum standards, you find that there is, AT1 is included in the tower designations. We might want to think about amending either the AT1 and the other designations to include cell towers as permitted uses, or do we want a CT1 or CT zone for cell towers? I don't know which would be the best, but it is confusing, and it was confusing to several of the commission members before the meeting, and I know that people in the audience, anybody trying to look this up, it had to be confusing for some of them. I don't have any problem with doing it, and I agree this is a great place for a cell tower. It's just we might want to think about tweaking our ordinance.
Yes, sir. We just need to make a text change and bring it up in front of you to get it done, yes.
I think it'd be a good idea.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yeah, a question for legal. Even though I know it's a less intense area with the AT1, does it still have the overriding AT1 maximum structural height of 35 feet?
Not on a cell tower.
Okay, so
Cell tower is
the cell
different.
tower is not considered a structure?
Correct.
Thank you.
Is there a height waiver under the tower portion of the minimum standards? I don't remember seeing that.
If they wish to go higher than the maximum allowed, they would have to go to the Board of Adjustments.
Okay, so even though we approve this, and there's a 35-foot
Well,
restriction?
If you look under the 8.01, it allows to go higher than 35 feet.
Under the minimum standard
That's
section?
correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? We have a motion by Ms. Casabon, a second by Mr. Willie to approve. Please vote.
I hate to see a 35-foot cell tower.
Motion carries. Thank you. ZC 15-02-013, existing zoning, PF1, Public Facilities District, NC4, Neighborhood Institutional District, and A2, Suburban District. Proposed zoning, ED2, Higher Education District. The parcels, 58.4526 acres. The petitioner, David Boatner. The owner, Kiwanis Club of New Orleans Incorporated. The parcel is located on the south side of US Highway 190, east of South Tranquility Road, being 31294 Highway 190, Lacombe, Ward 9, District 11. Staff?
The 2025 future land use plan calls for the area to be developed as a planned district with single-family residences in conservation areas. The site was previously developed and operated as a foster care residential housing facility. The purpose of the ED2 Higher Educational Zoning District is to provide for the location of public or private schools that serves students of driving age or serve larger student populations. The requested zoning change does not meet the 2025 future land use plan. However, considering the location of the site and the purpose of the ED2, staff does not have any objection to the request and would like to recommend approval.
Thank you. Mr. Marone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Marone on behalf of the petitioner. This property is the old K-Bar Ranch property, which some of you may be familiar with, which is located along US Highway 190, just outside of Slidell. The property, as you see, is just over 58 acres, and there are actually 9 separate structures on the property. This property has a long history of serving the Slidell and St. Tammany Parish community. For over 40 years, the facility provided services to children in need. It was housing for those youths in Louisiana that were part of the foster care system. However, about 2 years ago, or mid-2012, due to budget cuts at the state level, the facility was forced to close, and the facility has been closed since that time and has been vacant. There's been an effort to reopen the facility to service veterans in need, but that effort failed, unfortunately. My clients propose to bring the property back into use, but in order to do that, we need the zoning for the educational district that is before you now. And as Ms. Lambert stated, the reason that we need the zoning, the ED2, is really because of the nature of our use and the age of the people that will be participating and residing on the property. And they're adults, so they will be of driving age. The operator of the facility will be the New Orleans Mission, and this facility will be named the Hope House. Its intent is to provide help and assistance to those that need it and to help make those individuals self-sufficient. And there are really 2 components to this program. One is a vocational, and the other is a discipleship component. So the individuals that take part in this program will learn job skills, but they'll also develop a relationship with Jesus Christ, and those 2 will be dual-tracked and of equal importance to the individuals that will be housed on the property if, in fact, the zoning is passed. This program is really, in a sense, a graduate program, though. It is not a first step for these individuals. To be eligible to be a part of this program, you would first have to have spent 60 days in another program located in the facility in New Orleans, and you would have had to have graduated from that facility. And you would have needed to have at least also a GED to be eligible to take part in the program at the K-Bar Ranch property. So our client would work very closely with the local churches to further the discipleship component. They would also procure jobs to help with the job skills component. So with those uses in mind, given the past uses of the property, we would respectfully submit to you that this property is very well suited for this use. In fact, it's kind of tailor-made for it. So, you know, the property has a long history of providing needed services to the community. My client is pleased to further that history and excited about the opportunity. So with that said, we would respectfully request your approval of the zoning of the old K-Bar Ranch property to ED2 so that we might move forward with the program as I've laid out for you. I'll be happy to answer any questions that any of you may have. Mr. Boatner is here as well if you might have any questions of him. But we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Marone. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the change? Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition? Hearing none, I close it to the public and I bring it back to the commission. Mr. Randolph.
Yes, I'd like to move that this be approved.
Motion made by Mr. Randolph, second by Mr. Drum. Mr. Matthews.
Paul, one quick question.
Yes.
For ED2, the religious mission of the owners is not germane, but there are several other things that are. Would this be considered a vocational school? Is that what you're going to try to fall under?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
That's correct.
And I didn't understand the reference to, by Helen or you of the driving age. Is that in the ED2? I didn't see it.
If you look at the purpose, it says, under ED2, it says the purpose of the district is to provide for the location of public or private schools that serve students of driving age or serve larger student populations.
Okay. I've never,
It's not under the
never looked
permitted,
at that.
it's
Okay.
above.
Okay. I was just confused by that. Okay, thank you, Paul.
Yes, sir.
I have no problems with it, it's just those questions. Thank you.
Mr. Lauren.
Paul? I'm very familiar with that property. In 1985, I had the great privilege of being president of the New Orleans Kiwanis Club. At that time, the Kiwanis Club owned the property and furnished the facilities, and the state furnished the operating funds. And I understand how it, when the state cut back, that was the end of that. I guess my question is it the intent now that the Kiwanis Club would be continue in the role of being the owner and the provider of the facilities, or?
No, the Kiwanis Club would be selling the facility to my client, which would be the owner, and would run this program out of there.
Okay, and how is it to be funded?
It is, well, from a variety of sources, but I believe a lot of it is private funding.
Thank you.
Mr. Randolph? No further questions? Any other questions? We have a motion by Mr. Randolph and a second by Mr. Drum to approve. Please vote. Motion carries. Thank you. ZC 15-02-014, existing zoning A2 Suburban District, proposed zoning A2 Suburban District and manufactured housing overlay. The parcel is 2 acres. The petitioner, Laura Willie. The owner, Calvin J. and Laura Willie. The parcel is located on the west side of Jim Willie Road, north of Haskins Road, west of Louisiana Highway 1077, Ward 1, District 3. Staff?
The 2025 future land use plan calls for the area to be developed with residential uses, including mobile homes. Staff does not have any objection to the request and would like to recommend approval.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
It's 2 acres of family land. It's sitting in the middle of,
If you'd state your name and...
oh, I'm sorry. My name is Laura Willie. And the land is 2 acres of family land, and it's sitting in the middle of like 10 acres of family land. And it's actually, the land is actually my husband's land, my ex-husband's land. It's just in both of our names. But he wants to live back by his family. And he's not in really good health, and he's not in a position to put a house on it right now. He's on Social Security disability, so he doesn't make a lot of money. So that's why he can't afford to put a house on it, but he'd really like to live by his family. His aunt would live right next to him, on the acre right next to him, and his mom would live on the 2 acres up from him, and he'd like to live by his family.
Understood. If you will, fill out a speaker's card, if you haven't.
Me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favor of this? Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition? Seeing none, I close it to the public and I bring it to the commission. Ms. Casbon.
Yes, I'm familiar with the area. I'll make a motion to approve.
A second.
We have a motion by Ms. Casbon, second by Mr. Willie. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Motion carries. Thank you. ZC 15-02-015, existing zoning, Highway Commercial 1, and PBC 1, Planned Business Center. The plan zoning, PBC 1, Planned Business Center. The parcel, 5.1 acres. The petitioner, Jeffrey D. Shane. The owner, Greengate North Park LLC. The location, parcel located east of Chartiers Oak Drive and Wolverine Drive, south of Three Rivers Road, Ward 3, District 5. Staff?
The requested zoning change does not meet the objectives of the 2025 future land use plan. However, the majority of the 5.1 acre site is already zoned PBC1 and surrounded by properties zoned PBC1. Staff doesn't have any objection to the request and would like to recommend approval.
Mr. Shane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeff Shane of the Jones Fussell Law Firm in Covington, and I represent Greengate North Park LLC, which is the owner and developer of North Park, and in particular, this will be what's called Phase 4A. If you will look at the second sheet of the staff report, that probably tells the story the best. Somewhere through the comprehensive rezoning process and our request to get the zoning set up, if you will, for the development of this tract, lo and behold, we zoned approximately 80% of this 5.1 acres as PBC1, but obviously left the southerly and westerly portion zoned HC1. Now that we have a finite plan of development and know that we want to create this parcel to be one lot of record, and by the way, that matter will be coming before you next week at the Planning Commission level, at which point you'll see this lot coming to you as a Phase 4B. We obviously would like to have one zone that would be homogeneous so that our user won't have to deal with two zones in developing a site plan on the property. So for those reasons, we respectfully request that you recommend that the entirety of this to be known as Lot 12, Phase 4B, be zoned PBC1. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to address them.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of this change? Is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing no one, I close it to the public and I bring it to the commission. Mr. Davis?
I actually feel compelled to make this PBC 1. I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Davis. Second by Mr. Richard. Mr. Matthews?
Staff, Helen, it looks like there's still going to be a small triangle in this that's not going to be PBC1. It's going to be HC. It's going to be completely surrounded by PBC or educational districts. Does this belong to somebody else, or do we know what this is?
No, we'll just have to readjust the map. Sometimes it happens, it's just the GIS that is, but it's part of the same parcel of land.
Because it looks like a pretty good-sized piece of property.
It's, well, you're
Mr.
talking
Shane?
about the little sliver?
Well, if the whole thing that's designated on here is 5 acres, this is pretty close to an acre, it looks like. 3/4 of an acre at least.
Okay, wait, yes, I think that we had, there might have been an issue with the legal description, and then we adjusted the discrepancy. That's why the whole parcel was advertised to have the whole entire parcel rezoned to PBC1. Is that what you're
Okay,
referring to?
Do you see the little triangle
I-
on your map? Okay.
South of subject.
that little triangle, this. Okay, so somebody else owns this? Okay, so it's gonna be completely surrounded by educational or public, and that's gonna be highway commercial. Seems like we're setting up another problem here. Jeff, you shed some light here?
Mr. Shane.
Thank
your
you. I'll
comment.
try to. What little bit I bring to the table tonight. All is well. You're correct. I mean, that parcel does become an island, but there was an active exchange between Greengate North Park LLC and North Lake Christian School. I'm pretty certain that the school owns that triangle now. If not, they're going to certainly have joint use of it with an access way to connect to the school. So I'm sure that you will see something on this triangle in the future as we go forward with the development plan.
Okay,
So you're correct, there's a piece of the puzzle that's still probably not the right zone, but I think it's to be determined as to who will be petitioning and what zone we'll need.
Okay, I just didn't want to leave that out there, and some fool's gonna have a problem with it in the future. And this piece is just north of North Lake Christian School, is that correct?
Well, really north, more so east, northeast. The ED1 is in fact the North Lake Christian School campus.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other comments by the commission? We have a motion by Mr. Davis and a second by Mr. Richard to approve. Please vote. Motion carries. ZC 15-02-016, existing zoning, HC2 Highway Commercial District and NC4 Neighborhood Institutional District. Proposed zoning, I2 Industrial District. The parcel, 4.668 acres. The petitioner, Parish Council by motion, December 4th, 2014. The parcel is located on the west side of Camp Villery Road, north of US Highway 190, Ward 9, District 11. Staff?
The two sites in questions are currently developed with an outdoor storage yard and an office warehouse. The objective of the zoning change is to bring the sites into compliance with the appropriate zoning, and staff doesn't have any objection and would like to recommend approval.
Is there anyone in the public which wishes to speak in favor? Anyone wish to speak in opposition?
I just have a general question.
Please come to the podium.
I'd just like to ask, why is this being requested by the parish council and not the owner of the property?
Staff?
That was the decision of the councilman to introduce it. I don't know why he didn't request the owners to come forward and make an application.
Council?
If you review the history, several times during the course of a year, motions are made by the parish council to refer zoning issues to the zoning commission for review. Most of the time, it is to review an issue such as this, to bring something that was in existence already, their structures on the property, to bring them into line with the appropriate zone that they should be in. Particularly in the event that if there's financing on the property or there's a storm or a fire that destroys part of it and it's not properly zoned, then there's great difficulty in actually getting it to be able to be rebuilt because it's a non-conforming use.
Thank you. We have a recommendation by staff. I close it to the public and I bring it back to the commission. We have a motion by Mr. Lauren,
Second.
second by Mr. Randolph. Mr. Matthews.
Understanding in this particular piece why it probably does need to be rezoned, but I thought we had kind of taken the stand that unless somebody came forward that we could at least ask questions if we had them, we were going to postpone these matters. I mean, are we going to do it? Are we not going to do it? What's the point now? I mean, we have asked the council not to do this without sending somebody, not a councilman obviously, but the ownership. And it appears that we're not getting much service out of that.
I actually spoke to one of the representatives, and he informed me that he was going to come to the meeting, so I don't know exactly if something came up or...
Mr. Randolph?
I'm sorry. I second the motion.
Yes. Are there any other comments? We have a motion by Mr. Lauren and a second by Mr. Randolph to approve. Mr. Matthews.
I'll move to postpone.
We have a motion by Mr. Matthews to postpone and a second by Mr. Dougherty. The motion to postpone takes precedence over a motion to approve. What will now happen is we will vote on the motion to postpone first. So I asked to vote on the motion, Mr. Matthews, postpone till next month. A motion to postpone until next month by Mr. Matthews, seconded by Mr. Dougherty. I'd ask you to vote on that motion. Motion fails. We now have a motion to approve. Please vote. Motion carries. ZC 15-02-017, text change. Ordinance to amend ordinance CS number 14-3204, section 7.06, accessory buildings and structures. 7.06, order please, 7.0602, boathouses and slips to limit the permitted size of boathouses on designated scenic streams in St. Tammany Parish. Staff.
The request here is in regards to item number C. No boathouse shall exceed 16,000 square feet, and the request here is to add a stipulation that except that any boathouse constructed on a state-designated scenic river shall not exceed a size of 800 square feet, and staff doesn't have any objection to the request. I apologize, 1,600 square feet. And
Thank you
not
for
to
the
exceed
clarification.
800 on a scenic river.
Is there anyone from the public which wishes to speak in favor? Anyone wish to speak in opposition? Yes, please approach the podium and state your name. And if you haven't, please fill out a speaker's card.
I have. My name is Barbara Dodds, and I would urge you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir. That's why we're here.
I'm David Durbus. I'm a real estate broker. I sell a lot of riverfront property in St. Tammany Parish. And I'm a little concerned about the practicality of limiting a boathouse to 800 square feet. I have a friend who has a boat that's 20 feet wide and 50 feet long. Well, that's 1,000 square feet, and it's in a boathouse. So he couldn't, and he's on a scenic river, and you really don't even notice his boathouse, where it is with the trees around it, et cetera. But I don't think that's a practical number for someone who owns a yacht if they want to utilize riverfront anywhere on the Tchefuncte River, the Avita River, or any of the rivers that are designated scenic. So that would be my concern. It's not a practical number.
Thank you. If you would, Mr. Durbus, fill out a speaker's card for us. Is there any other comment from the public? Yes, ma'am.
Barbara Dodds, I would like to point out that 800 square feet has been the standard until 2 months ago. And everyone has that standard applied to their boathouse when they apply for a permit, until it was changed for other purposes a couple of months ago. So up till now, 800 has been a perfectly good number. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Seeing none, I close it to the public and I bring it back to the commission. Mr. Davis.
Yes, I have a problem with the, on line C. I have a problem with the variable, saying either 1,600 or 800. I have a problem with trying to identify what constitutes a scenic river or a tributary of a scenic river. I live on Bayou Lacombe. Am I a scenic river? Yes. But I live on a tributary that feeds into Bayou Lacombe. Does that mean that I can go ahead and put 800 square foot or 1,600 square foot? This is where I'm getting a little confused about. I think the 800 square foot is something that, and the first time we came up with this idea was to increase the double size, because that boats are getting bigger, people are having more, larger vehicles and stuff like that. So I think by putting in the variable from 16 to 18 and indicating that it has to be on a state designated scenic river, it's kind of tough. So with that being said, I would make a motion to approve this only if you leave out the 800 square foot. But I'm not making a motion yet.
Mr. Matthews.
Helen, maybe you can shed some light. How did we come up with 800 square feet on the scenic rivers? I know the 1,600 square feet, we amended that for some of these boats on the lake and stuff like that. But how did we come up with this? Can you help us?
Mr. Chairman, if you would like to address the question to legal counsel, because the text change came from the council office.
800 square feet was in the original ordinance that you amended to go up to 1,600 square feet. So 800 square feet has been the standard for many, many years. But because of the situation that developed, particularly along the lake, where larger boathouses were needed, it was amended by this commission, sent to the council. Then the council accepted the amendment of going to 1,600 square feet, but then sent back to this commission the caveat that on designated scenic rivers, that it be limited to 800 square feet. Scenic rivers, if you try to construct a boathouse on a scenic rivers, you actually have to go to the state of Louisiana and get a scenic rivers permit. The Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries is the one that controls who gets the scenic rivers permit to build the size of boathouse that you want. But in this parish, if this is adopted, it would be limited to the 800 square feet on scenic rivers. As far as like tributaries, your question,
Yes.
Jimmy, it is defined in the Scenic Rivers Act of Louisiana what constitutes the river as far as how far you go back and all with your tributaries. So it is something that is defined in Louisiana law.
Yeah, I'm just concerned with the whole variable of that and the identification of exactly what the scenic river starts and stops, that's all.
There's people doing a permit. I just question whether 800 square feet is, in today's market, really adequate. 1,600 may be too big for a scenic river, but 800 seems to be pretty small. Just because it's been the standard, you know, for the last 30 years, boats have gotten bigger.
Mr. Lauren.
I have a question for Mr. Hand, please. And put it in a frame of reference, if you're coming out of Madisonville, going towards Mandeville, when you cross the bridge, immediately on the left is the condominiums. And they're not on the river, but they are on the river, okay? And the way they're constructed, they're 2 stories, but you pull your boat up underneath the bottom. You'd be in violation of all kind of stuff here if that's considered on the river. So my question is, would that be on the river?
I believe in the review of this matter that there is a specific exemption pertaining to the Madisonville area. And I'm trying to recall in my mind exactly what it was, but it described that part of the river in Madisonville that is specifically exempted from the scenic rivers, that you can go in and you don't need to get a permit. You know, it's not restricted. I actually called the town of Madisonville to determine what their limitation was. And when I spoke to the building person, he told me that there was no restriction on size. I believe that in Mandeville, I think it was 1,400 square feet in Mandeville. So we called around, we called Slidell, we called various entities to determine what their square footage was. Came up with the 1,600 square feet was not the highest. I think the highest we found was about 2,000 square feet. So that's how the 1,600 square feet was derived at. But the 800 square feet was the standard for many, many years here, that you couldn't build a boathouse. And consistently, month after month, before the Board of Adjustments, we would get appeals from people who had larger boats who needed a variance in order to build a larger boathouse than the 800 square feet. So they felt like the best way to address it, since it kept consistently coming up, was to increase the overall size to the 1,600 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from the commission? Mr. Davis,
Have we voted on anything?
there is no motion on the floor.
I make a recommendation, we send this back to the council and ask them to delete the portion right past 1,600 square foot. The whole exception that a boathouse constructed on state designated scenic river shall not exceed, just wipe that out and leave it at 1,600 square foot for the maximum square footage of a boathouse. Can I make a recommendation for that, or?
Well,
or
as
do we
the
just
commission,
don't vote?
we make motions. So you can make a motion to deny, which would then go to the council.
Can I make a motion to approve with the change?
No.
Okay, I'll make a motion to deny.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to deny.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Davis and a second by Mr. Matthews to deny. Is there any further comments? Seeing none, I ask for a vote. The motion is to deny. Is,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah,
my vote should be yes and not no.
okay. Given the confusion, I would ask this clear the screen. And we'll just, for clarification, the motion is to deny, therefore an affirmative yea vote will be to deny. A no vote is opposing the deny. Again, the motion by Mr. Davis, second by Mr. Matthews, is to deny. Please vote. The motion to deny carries. Plan review cases. Applications requiring review and approval on site plans along a planned corridor district by the Zoning Commission are as follows. PR 15-02-001, use medical office building. The corridor, Highway 21 planned corridor. Existing zoning, HC2, Highway Commercial District. Use size, 12,900 square feet. The petitioner, David Derbies. The owner, William L. Terrell, Monica P. Oland, Richard D. Oland. The parcel is located on the west side of Louisiana Highway 21, north of Louisiana Highway 1085, Ward 1, District 1. Staff?
As mentioned, the petitioner is proposing a new medical office building on a parcel located along Highway 21 planned corridor. Site landscape plan has been provided. The petitioner is requesting to reduce the required number of Class B trees in the front planting area, basically in order to be able to preserve the existing trees. And the proposed number of 13 shrubs will have to be moved along the parking area to provide the screen as required. Also, what I'd like to point out is, which is missing on your staff report, is that the owner will have to provide stub outs to provide access to the adjacent properties as it is required along Highway 21. And at this time, staff would like to recommend approval according to the following conditions that are listed from 1 to number 15.
Thank you. Mr. Derbies?
David Durbis, Durbis Real Estate, here on behalf of Dr. Terrell and Olend, and on the prospective property owner, Dr. Watson. We concur with all the staff recommendations. However, the what do you call it? Stub out is sort of new. I know the Association of Associations would like that to happen, but I just have a few comments in that regard. And I don't know if you're familiar with where this property is, but Dr. Terrell's had an office building next door called Children's Medical Center, which has been there for 35 to 40 years. It's a nice-looking, kind of Haystown-looking building. Anyway, regarding this cross easement concept, if we put a curb cut here, it would be to Dr. Terrell's property, which he is the owner, but there's no law that requires him to connect to that. So it would be essentially taking 4 valuable parking spaces out of Commerce to create a driveway to nowhere. That's the first concern. The second, and those parking spaces, the 4 spaces that you would likely lose, probably, if we're trying to keep a pretty significant good parking ratio, we're at about 200 to 1, which medical office buildings require a higher number of parking spaces per square foot of building. We potentially would be losing some ability to build a portion of this building because of the reduction in parking. The other concept is this property has to be, or happens to be, located right where they're getting ready to build a U-turn lane on the widening of Highway 21. So all of the traffic heading from I-12 into Covington, if they want to use this property or Dr. Terrell's to access Dr. Terrell's property or this property, they're going to have to do a U-turn, and the U-turn is essentially going to put them right in the front of this property. So you're heading into Covington, you hit the U-turn, which is right here in the front, and you could go to this building or to Dr. Terrell's building or further down the street to the drugstore. So there are essentially 3 properties that would benefit potentially from the cross easement. That would be this building, existing Dr. Terrell's building, which he's not obligated to create cross connectivity and the property next door. And then my other concern is if and when this property next door gets developed, anybody coming from I-12 toward Covington who wants to access this building will take this U-turn lane, and you're going to force all the traffic through this guy's parking lot. So I see that as a bit of a negative. You know, if we have to do it, we'll comply, but those are my, opinions on why not to have that cross easement and losing those 4 parking spaces to accommodate something that may never be built. Otherwise, we agree with everything.
Thank you.
And are willing to comply.
Mr. Chairman, may I share some light here?
Yes, please.
I think that staff can understand that if you're looking on the west side of the property, which is already developed, it would require the future owner or the future developer of the parcel in question to lose some parking spaces. And we can understand that request. However, on the other side, it is definitely possible to provide the stub out. And if you look on the other side of Highway 21, all the parcels along the east side of Highway 21 all have stub outs. They all connected together. You have a few shopping centers and they're connected together, which facilitates the if you have to go from one parking lot to another. And that's why we encourage that, so someone doesn't have to go back on Highway 21 to go to the next building. So staff wouldn't necessarily have any objections to the request from the representative here as far as not losing the number of parking spaces on the west side of the property, but definitely require it on the east side where it's undeveloped and in the future development can connect to it.
And we agree with that. No problem.
Okay. Any other public comment? Sandra.
Thank you. Sandra Slifer, I'm the convener of the AOA. That we met with David and talked with him about the project. We're in favor of the project. The AOA did vote to request cross-connectivity for this property. And, it's something that does relieve a lot of traffic on Highway 21. We wish it was something that was adopted in other parts of the parish as well, because we think that it, makes it easier for people to, frequent multiple businesses in a given area without the hassle of going out onto a highway. And in the Highway 21's case, of course, that now means doing a lot of U-turns. We understand that there is an existing building, and that it would mean that he would eliminate those parking places, but he is the owner of that other building. And it does seem as if there is an opportunity to perhaps share those parking spaces between those 2 offices. So we would just like for you to consider providing that access. Anyone who's been on 21, has probably benefited greatly from having that traffic not get on the highway and stay within those shopping areas and doctor's offices. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment for or against? Hearing none, I close it to the public. I bring it back to the commission. But Helen, if you would please clarify again what the requirements will be that we are going to take under consideration relative to the stub outs, west, east.
Basically, along Highway 21 would, as part of the requirements of what we suggest is to have stub outs to have the adjacent parcels connected. Here, the developer, Mr. David Durbis, is requesting to have it only on the east side of the property where it's undeveloped, not on the west side of the property because he will be losing some parking spaces. Is that what you're asking?
Yes. It will, more specifically, what is staff's recommendation for us to consider? And if the commission wishes to amend it, we can. But is it going to be as the original with the 4 coming out, or per your conversation with Mr. Durbus.
It would definitely be preferable to have it on both sides, but the decision is in your hands. He's making a request to have it on just one side.
Okay, so the commission is going to make the decision for the recommendation to go forward
I
as
would-
to whether it's stubbed out on both or just
If
one?
it's possible, maybe we can ask Mr. Durbus to clarify would it be possible to provide that stub out with the adjacent parcel that's already developed? I haven't been on the site to see if it is actually possible to provide it. Is there a ditch or is there anything?
Mr. Durbus, have you come forward and clarify what you are going to agree with so that the commission can respond accordingly?
I think the cross driveways are a good concept, first of all. When we drew the floor plan, the site plan up, we didn't anticipate this as a requirement. We just didn't discuss it until essentially tonight from the planning standpoint. We don't want to lose the 4 parking spaces. The reality is, I would like to see them build the 4 parking spaces and agree that if in fact connectivity ever becomes available, that you would exempt or not change you would okay the fact that you lose these 4 parking spaces tonight, so that we still meet the parking requirements. I think we exceed the parking requirements, actually. So maybe the 4 parking spaces wouldn't be the end of the world in this project. But I think a good point is that the adjoining landowner, there's no legal requirement for him to connect to this potential future driveway. So that, if in fact he wants to connect at some later date, I don't think the new owner of this property will have any objection to it. I would kind of like to see it develop the way it's planned now. We're agreeing to create the connectivity to the property to the right or east. And I guess if the connectivity option ever came up, that we would do it. I can't really agree. It's kind of agreeing to agree in the future. I don't see it practically as ever happening. The building's been there for 35 years. I don't see them going anywhere. I don't see those 2 parking lots being connected because I don't see the need. These are not multi-tenant buildings that have 6 tenants per building. This is pretty much medical office building. But whatever you guys decide, we'll agree to.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dougherty.
Mr. Durbus, I see that there's some pretty tall trees that's going to be put in along Highway 21. And not being real familiar with Highway 21, are there any overhead power lines that run along that area in front?
There are, but they've already been moved to accommodate the widening of Highway 21. So none of the trees that we're preserving on our site plan are impacted by those power lines.
So they won't at any point in time come close to those power lines?
Mr. Doherty, the trees are already existing. He's not planning on planting any new trees.
These are all existing trees on site.
Okay, well then, my concern is that we require people to plant trees under power lines, and then 20 years down the road, here we come in and start chopping them up, and it really makes a mess. So
Hey.
these are existing trees, and that's not gonna, well, if it happens, it happens. But
Well, we're going to attempt to preserve as many of the natural trees, they're pretty good-sized trees, as we can. Sometimes construction doesn't allow that, and there's a mechanism certainly within the planning staff to cause us to have to replant. If we take something out, we're going to have to plant other trees. But I don't think anywhere in this green space will we be under a power line.
okay.
I don't
Good,
think
thank
that's
you.
going to be an issue.
Thank you.
Mr. Matthews.
Helen, are these stub outs a requirement under any ordinance?
No, it's not.
It's just a
We-
suggestion
It's a
by
suggestion,
staff.
which has worked very well on the east side of Highway 21, where you have many of the parking lots that are connected by stub outs.
Well, when you have particularly like shopping centers where the owners of the shopping centers want people to come back and forth in their shopping centers from one shopping center to the other, and they agree to do this, I think that's all well and good. In situations like this, there's really no benefit to the owner of the property to create such a thing.
The benefit,
Okay,
I
go
apologize,
ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, I
that's all right.
apologize.
He won't, a doctor's office is not gonna benefit from the people going back and forth to the other stores in the area, that sort of thing. What we're doing with this is we're creating an easement. And I don't think we can do that. Because we're setting up that people will have to go through his driveway, across his parking lot to access another piece of property. That's an easement. And I'm not sure we can do that.
We're not saying that the future medical office will not have their own stub out on Highway 21. The only thing we're requesting here is to have access to the adjacent parcels, which is a requirement that's been placed on all the other plan reviews that are on the east side of Highway 21. To answer your second question is that the advantage is if for some reason the driveway is blocked in front of that particular office building, it gives them a second access to exit. And if for some reason they need to share the parking lot, then it makes it possible for the customers or the patients to go from one facility to another.
Well, that's if the owners of these pieces of property want to do that. And you said it's been required on other pieces of property. So it's a requirement to do this, or it's a suggestion to do this?
Well, it's been placed as part of the comments on our staff reports and approved by the zoning commission and constructed. However, I understand your point is that when it comes to the parcel that is to the east that is undeveloped, what the property owner here will be required is to build half of the stub out all the way up to their property line. When the next owner comes in, that will make it a requirement that they connect to that particular stub out.
Okay,
On the case of the one on the west, I mean, legally, we could ask legal counsel, we could probably not require them to connect.
Can we require them to do it on the east? Is there a requirement in our code to do that? Or
There's
it's a
no
suggestion?
requirement in our code. However, we're placing it as a requirement here.
If he says no, then what?
If he says no, who says no?
The owner,
On the east or the west?
either owner,
Well, on
either
the-
or both.
On the east side, we're placing it as a requirement
can't
that
say
if
requirement.
that if you decide to vote against it, then it will not be a requirement.
It's not a requirement. It's a suggestion by staff.
Yeah, it's a recommendation by
Okay,
staff.
recommendation, but there's no requirement in our law
That's correct.
that
I'm-
requires
okay,
such a thing.
I was mistaken in the
Okay,
word that I
okay,
was
okay,
using, but this is a staff recommendation.
Right, it is what the staff recommends. But if he says he doesn't want to do it, then we would turn this whole project down for such a thing?
No, you will not necessarily turn the whole project down. However, as the commission, you will either recommend approval according to staff recommendations or according to staff recommendations, including or excluding whichever recommendation you wish.
I think we would be ill-advised to recommend an easement on somebody's property without their approval.
Mr.
And
Chairman,
that's what we're doing,
on the west side, I can understand.
either
and
side, either side.
It's been recommended on all the other parcels on the east side.
And they agreed to it.
They agreed to build their portion of the stub out all the way up to the property line, and then the next development
And
It was made-
if they want to do that, that's fine. But if he says no, then I don't think we should require him. And it concerns me that with this easement, if somebody pulls into his driveway, takes a right to go across these parking lots and has an accident of some type, they're gonna sue him for requiring or having this traffic pattern.
I believe, and your point's well taken, Mr. Matthews, but I believe what staff places in front of the commission for discussion are recommendations. These are recommendations that the staff has made, which is no different than any other the negotiations that go on constantly when these parcels come forward. Your point is taken that we can't mandate it. However, staff is recommending it, and I think the public has recognized there is a value to that. It's probably a safety value. There's a connectivity value. Highway 21 is very heavily traveled. And then it's up to them to decide whether or not they will comply and what the ramifications would be. But again, your point was well taken.
But
those are staff recommendations that are being
I
placed
think
in
this
front
is
of
an
us.
ill-advised recommendation on more than one level.
So noted. Mr. Lauren?
You sure? Okay.
Yes, I am sure.
All right. Let's go back to what the heart of this is that Highway 21 has a planned corridor overlay on it. And the whole object on the east side of having the connectivity was to reduce the number of curb cuts where people would be coming out of places of business driving onto the road. So on the east side, by having this gentleman's agreement in the form of a recommendation, there are several shopping centers, strip malls that have connectivity. And true, somebody may not be coming out of one of those businesses and going to the doctor's office, but some of them may be coming out of the doctor's office wanting to go to one of the businesses. And by having the connectivity, you don't have to have as many curb cuts. And you have a lot better flow of traffic on 21. It's worked extremely well on the east side. In the form of a recommendation, I think it's a good idea. I mean, if there's a question about losing the parking places, mark off the parking places, put the stub outs, and just put one of those little concrete deals and use them until the time becomes when there is a tenant on the east side. That's a good suggestion.
Thank you. Mr. Richard?
Mine's very much similar. I think the cross-connectivity is a good thing. We've seen it in other municipalities. I know when I built the property I had on the West Causeway Approach, we were under a chloro, and it works. I think the staff recommendations are wonderful. That being said, we've also got a compromise on the table here that talks about putting the stub outs on the east side of the property, which is undeveloped. I think that's a win-win for everybody. In fact, if it's not developed for a period of time, the stub outs become another parking space. If you give the developer some relief on the landscaping that would be required around that stub out, I think it's almost enough room to probably park another vehicle. So I'm going to move that we approve this with the modification that the cross-connect is stubbed out on the eastern side of the property.
We have a motion by Mr. Richard. Second by Mr. Lauren. Is there any further comments? Hearing none, I ask for a vote. Motion carries. Thank you. Is there any old business to be brought forth? Is there any new business? Mr. Matthews?
In our planning packet for next week, there should be a inclusion of the revised rules and regulations for planning and zoning. that we've worked on for 2 years, and it looks like we've finally got them. And even though Terry made a suggestion for a change tonight, I don't make any changes. Let's get this thing done. But I ask that everybody take a look at them. They're fairly extensive for both planning and zoning. Makes a few real substantial changes and quite a few minor changes. But please take a look at them. We're going to vote on them next Tuesday. Thank you.
David, excuse me, before we adjourn, we probably should have done something at the beginning of the meeting. But I think we would be remiss if we didn't do something either tonight or maybe, since we didn't do it at the beginning, wait and do it at the Planning Commission meeting in recognition.
I would
Let's do both.
recognize.
Why wouldn't we do both?
I would recommend we do both. And Pug, if you would, please make a statement and let's have a moment of silence.
Well, Marcus sat next to me for several years, and he was, at times he could be a little bit belligerent, he could be his own man, but Marcus was a very fine gentleman, and he was true to his principles. And he brought a lot to the table, and we're really going to miss him.
Mr. Matthews?
Marcus and I disagreed on many occasions, sometimes enthusiastically, but Marcus always voiced his opinion, and I think his opinions were considered and were, in his mind, the right thing to do and say, which was a good thing, and that's what we need on this commission. And we will, in fact, miss his opinions, and we will, in fact, miss Marcus.
And on behalf of the commission, the entire commission, we would ask you keep his family in your thoughts and prayers. And Mark served us very well, and we know he's in a much better place. So thank you all very much. I have a motion to adjourn. Thank you.